as we take a step back and we look at how consumers and small businesses are wanting to engage in financial services, we start with when we evaluate companies to invest in, are you really solving a problem? And is there a real pinch point for the end user? We are not people who think about, here's a great new technology, how can we apply it? We're much more working forwards from a consumer or a small business entity. What are those pinch points? So what are some of those pinch points? Well, first of all, access is a really key issue. Half of America, nearly half of America has a FICO score under 650. If you have a really low FICO score, most of the banks don't want to lend money to you, but you have need to get through the ups and downs of the month. So the banks don't want to lend money to you. You probably don't have a lot of liquid cash, so your deposits are not worth much to the bank. And thirdly, you probably don't need or don't want to go into a bank branch to be serviced. So we see an enormous number of opportunities in the new fintech space for neobanks. We have Current and we have Albert, who are actually meeting the consumer where they are and leveling the playing field and taking away the friction that exists around access. So the first one is access. The second thing is, if you look at the American consumer or the British consumer, and I would suggest consumers in other countries, the level of financial literacy is really low. So there's a real opportunity to be able to educate and to be incredibly transparent and to take away the mystery and some of the information asymmetry that exists between a financial service provider and the consumer. Now, consumers don't talk about their financial service products like they would talk about their car or their holiday or products and services that are much more high involvement. So consumers are not drawn to learning per se about financial service products. So you have to spoon feed the process where you encourage consumers to learn more, and as they learn more, they can make better decisions, and that you can take away the mystery and some of the confusion that exists around financial service products. So I think there's a real opportunity to do that as we go forward and as we can make a difference in the lives of people. The other pain points, I think, are around distribution. Now, people don't want to. I take a portfolio company called Remitly. Remitly basically has digitalized the process of moving money from the US, started with the US, Philippines, US, Mexico, US, India, and now has hundreds of corridors now running all over the world. But Remitly basically said, look, people do not want to go into a Western Union bank branch or go into any other kind of fixed distribution channel in order to send money home. What they want to do is be able to do it digitally, clearly, to be able to do it in a way that they have confidence and the system is authentic. And that basically leapfrogs the distribution channel. So if you look at digital and how it's playing out, then it's going to give more access. It's going to take away the friction and the mystery. And be much more transparent, and it can be delivered through a distribution channel that's massively more user-friendly. So if you can pull off any two of those three things, that's going to be amazing. And I think we're going to see a significant ascension in fintechs now going public, fintechs being bought by banks, fintechs buying other fintechs, what we call the super fintech. And that's all going to happen, and that velocity is increasing, and that cadence is becoming more rapid. So the challenge is going to be for the incumbent banks. We're seeing some of the more forward-leaning, more progressive banks who are now leaning in. I think some of them have been on your program. Of course, Citi and JP Morgan and Chase are three that would immediately come to mind. And I think some of the mega regionals now are starting to say, look, digital is no longer a passing fad. It's no longer a fool's errand. We have to figure out how to be good at this because it's where our consumers are. Now, how do we get good at it? We have to partner, we have to buy, we have to figure out how to tap into this very nascent still ecosystem. I don't think there's anything revolutionary in terms of what's happening with fintech that's not happening in a wide range of other industries. We're seeing education being delivered now digitally. We're seeing an explosion of innovation that's going on in healthcare, where practitioners can help their patients without people having to drive 40 minutes and park their car and go up in the elevator, and you can do it really simply over a video screen. And financial services is very much that. If we take a portfolio company like Current. Current has over 2 million customers, and they're millennials. They're people who probably have never walked into a bank branch in their life. When I talk to my children who would be in that demographic, the last thing they would do is feel the need to go into a bank branch. And the ability to be able to take advantage of the ubiquity of cell phones. I'm staring around looking for my, taking advantage of the ubiquity of a cell phone is really incredible now. So consumers want to be able to shop using their cell phone. They want to be, they want to have the option to be able to make investment decisions, to sign up for new products and services. And it's really hard to believe that once somebody has made the Promethean leap to executing a service or a product on a cell phone, that you go back to doing it face to face. Now, there are some things that will be long-standing vestiges of delivery through face to face, and we can talk about some of those if you like. But the vast majority of financial service transactions, which are by and large very tactical and are not high involvement, can very much be done over a cell phone. So if we look at that's certainly what's happening in the United States and in the UK, and there's certain legislation in the UK that's promoting consumer switching through open banking. But if we look at the developing world, we look at our investments in Brazil and in Mexico in particular. I mean, a company like Nubank is all digital, and they now have over 30 million customers. And 5 years ago, they were hardly on the map. So again, we see fintechs and digital meeting consumers where they are, not waiting, for an entity to have to go through a transformation in order to be able to meet where they are. That, I think, is a massive thing. Second one, I think I'd point to is that consumers are more and more demanding. There used to be a time where people were more tolerant of poor service, of low net promoter scores. We're now used to getting again on our smartphone and ordering something from Amazon, and it comes tomorrow, and it turns up in a box outside of on our doorstep. That leads to the consumer being much, much more demanding and much, much more challenging to a delivery mechanism. So I think we see more of that, and I think that's again puts pressure on the incumbent banks to be able to meet the consumer where they are, and for the fintechs to be able to step into that space. I think the last one I think that I would point to as we come out of COVID is that the consumer is more willing and able to unbundle financial service products. The banks have talked for a long time about cross-selling and upselling, and I think it's much harder to do than a lot of people think. But the consumer now, armed with this digital distribution capability, can very much have their checking account here and their deposit account here, their mutual fund here, their credit card here, their installment debt here, their mortgage somewhere else. And they can pull it all together and manage it really effectively. And we will see super apps start to emerge that will pull it together in a really cogent way. And I think that just leads to more power, a shift of power from the corporate to the consumer, which I think is nothing but a great thing. I would point to a couple of emerging themes. Of course, in the space of unsecured consumer lending, we're seeing the Credit Karmas of this world in the US now, with 110 million customers, just got bought by Intuit, which we led the A round with Ken Lin 7, 8, 9 years ago. In the UK, we have a version of that called ClearScore, which has, I think, 14 million customers, and it's the Credit Karma of the UK. So we're seeing the origination of consumer unsecured debt largely through digital channels, such as entities like that. I think that's a technology that is now very much with us. I think that we are seeing that the delivery of consumer financial services is increasingly becoming more and more segmented, where you're able to target different populations with more and more precision. That can be done digitally. So you can, people who have an interest in people who are Spanish speaking, for example, there are services and offers that will focus on them. The immigrant population, people who are super prime. And we're seeing that in a world where there's much more data available, and that data can allow you to be able to sub-segment and target. You can actually do that with more and more precision, which we're seeing happening. We're seeing entities like Current, who are using the influencers on YouTube and Twitter to recommend the product. and that becomes a distribution channel in itself. We are seeing entities that are focused on particular vertical banks, if you like. So the people who are involved in who are the influencers who are involved in the entertainment space, rather than them walking into a bank branch. And historically, the Hollywood types would go to City National on the West Coast. Now those people are people who are in their 20s and 30s, and the idea of going to a bank branch is not that exciting. But if you can deliver the services that an entertainment population wants digitally, you can see how that can be interesting. So there's a whole series of segmented vertical banks that I think are emerging. And what we're seeing is the whole homogeneity of banking starting to break apart into subsegments. The other one I'd point to is that the value-added chain is starting to break apart. My good old partner, Rich Fairbank, used to say that a strategy is what you affirmatively say you're not going to do. And we see so many banks who say, look, we're going to be all things to all people everywhere all the time. And that's not a strategy. It's not something that you can execute against, because there are some things that you're great at and some things that you're not so good at. And you want to allocate your resources where you can have the most impact. So we're seeing the value-added chain start to break up, where there are specialists emerging as originators. We have entities emerging that are really terrific at the back office, digitalization, and the use of artificial intelligence or machine learning. We have a company called Amount. And Amount basically offers in a box, if you like, to a large bank, a regional or a money center, the opportunity to get them into the buy now, pay later business, to get them into installment lending, to get them into credit cards, without them having to build all the infrastructure themselves. So we're seeing entities that start to specialize in the value chain. Again, this fragmentation or atomization of a chain is emerging. And it's so powerful, because if I'm an entity and I want to control this piece of the chain, I can cobble together the other pieces of the chain much faster than I used to be able to. And I can make the whole system work, the gestalt of it work incredibly well if I can join the dots up. We haven't really yet seen any industrial strength applications of the blockchain in finance. We see Mike Cagney at Figure doing some really interesting things, and he clearly is pushing the envelope. We have an investment in an entity called Springleaf that's looking to digitalize these data sets if you think of a next generation credit bureau. And it's coming, and there are significant advantages of it. And over the next 3 to 5 years, it will become much clearer. It would seem to me that the blockchain is a little bit behind where we're seeing the applications of crypto in general. I mean, the big revelation for QED was when we fully internalized that crypto is not going away. We see that be it Ethereum or be it Bitcoin, that's not going away. Consumers and small business want access to it. They want to be able to borrow against their ownership. They want to be able to put it into stable coins. They want to be able to move it cross-border. They'll want asset managers want to have a small piece of it in their portfolio to manage to their efficient frontier. So our investment in Bitso in Mexico City is about exactly doing that, which is helping Bitso organize, if you like, and prosecute more traditional, more orthodox financial service products around their core competence in crypto. So we are leaning very much into the future of the blockchain, and we're spending a lot of time thinking now about DeFi and where that might go, because there's a chance that it is going to be absolutely revolutionary and change the shape of everything we do. And as venture capitalists, we're in the business of trying to predict the future with very small amounts of data, and it's a space we're spending a lot of time on. If you look at the core competence of more traditional financial service entities, their competence is management of regulators, of funding, which you get from deposits, people walking in your bank branches and leaving money for you to manage, and the processes of compliance and KYC, AML. That's a space where banks do have a comparative advantage by and large, which then could lead to fintechs playing the role of the originators, if you like, of loans and deposits and mutual funds, etc. And I think that's one logical construct. Now, that means that the bank has to say, if you like, look, we're going to do what we do really well, and we'll let you do what you do really well. And the banks have to break the paradigm of not being all things to all people everywhere all the time. So I think that is one logical place. Ironically, we've also seen fintech funded banks that are very much de novo, that are offering regulatory windows to entities that are doing origination. So it's not as if they're old school. So you don't have to be old school to have capability in the back office. We're seeing a number of new entities emerge that are now offering those services. But that is one logical outcome. But if I'm a bank and I worry about being strategically one minus, if you like, into being in the lower value added piece of the value chain, where I can't eke out my economic rents. If you look at bank return on equity, Lynn, in the last, since the last recession, it was gradually moving up since 2007, 2008, and was just about to clear the cost of capital before the COVID recession hit. It's now gone sub cost of capital. And I think the world since then has irrevocably changed. And I think it's going to be a real challenge for banks, particularly in a low interest rate environment, and with the assault of fintechs on the core franchise of banks. And if I might add, the big money centers, the Citi, Chase, Cap Ones, Amex, going after the deposit franchises of the regionals, for the regionals to get, on average, above the cost of capital. They've got to do things differently. The other thing I would just add here, as you think about that, the value chain, is how many entities there are that are emerging that are focused on helping traditional players reduce their cost structure through the mechanization and automation of manual processes. One example is a portfolio company we have called Ocrolus, and they basically take paper-based applications and digitalize them so that digital data can be ingested into decisioning algorithms. That in the past would have been done by human beings doing data entry. Now that can be done by machines. So that can reduces error. It creates immutable audit trails, and is a whole lot cheaper. So I think we're going to see a lot more of fintechs emerging that are very focused on cost reduction and service improvement into banks. And the progressive banks are going to have to embrace those technologies in order to be able to stay relevant and get above the cost of capital. This is one man's opinion based on my own experience. I think this is a total canard. I think that I've seen entities that are held to the same regulatory standard when they've got 50 people in their organization as Bank of America or Wells Fargo. And what is, I think, so disheartening sometimes is that many of these smaller entities are attempting to actually be very, very pro-consumer, to promote access and transparency and openness and level the information asymmetry. And they are held to an incredibly high standard. And I would love to see our friends in the regulatory world be focused a little bit more about what the purpose is and give a little bit more buffer, leeway to entities that are trying to do the right thing, because the regulatory environment is really tough and complicated. And if I've only got a small number of people and I've got a very limited budget, I'm gasping for oxygen to keep my company going, it's very, very hard to be held to that standard. So that's just my experience. I've not seen any systematic analysis that would suggest that there really is regulatory arbitrage, but actually I don't see it. So having gone through this last recession, there was a lot of question marks about whether or not these fintechs would make it through, and whether or not credit risk would explode on them. By and large, it did not happen. It may be that there's some idiosyncrasies around this particular recession, Lynn, and this is not going to be like the next one, and there will be a next one. I think we're hopefully a few years away from that, because the consumer's in pretty good shape, the balance sheet's in good shape, and people have been saving a lot. But that we will see. From I go back from the Capital One days, having now managed credit through, I don't know, 4 or 5 different recessions, the robustness of your models and the care that you take in making credit decisions is very important. And the only way you know that you are any good at it is when you survive a recession. So I think that there will be some, just like there are some banks that will get credit wrong, I think there'll be some fintechs that get it wrong. I'll point to a portfolio company of ours called Mission Lane, which is built digitally and offers credit cards to near prime and subprime consumers, and we've never seen delinquency as low as we see it now. And it looks like credit has behaved really well. But what we've done there is we've marshaled the full technology, the full skill set of so many people who are ex-Capital One and people that have come from really great credit management shops. And we've invested in artificial intelligence and new data sets, and we've gone back and rigorously proven out our models. But I think your point is well taken, that unlike offering a debit card where you get very instant feedback and you understand what the LTVs and CACs are, credit is different. You have to lend money to people. You have to then figure out if it was a good decision or not. You have to build models to predict whether or not you can separate the wheat from the chaff. And to do that and do it systemically and then do it on a population that's big enough takes years, not months. And that patience is not something that invariably exists in the venture capital world. So what we find as QED, because we grew up in credit and we grew up around making these decisions, that we get a lot of people coming to us and saying, look, we want to get into the lending business, but we understand that it's treacherous. How do we do it? Help us think that through. And that's, from Nubank in Brazil to Mission Lane to Amount and Avant to SoFi, Prosper, Zopa, lending companies that we've been involved in over the years. This titanic struggle between the old school banks and the emerging disruptors. I think that if you just think about the pros and cons of different entities, what do the banks have? They have regulatory access, they've got stable funding, they've got earnings, they've got customer bases and proprietary data sets wrapped around the customer bases. They have got brands, particularly local brands for regionals and national brands for some of the others. And what they don't have is they don't have a DNA around digital, although some of them are building it and building it well. And the separation of the people who are going to be growing and flourishing in 10 years are the people who now invest big time in it. If you wait till 2026 to invest, I think you'll be in big trouble. And I don't think there's any digital deniers anymore in the boardrooms of the big banks. I think 2 years ago there was. And they're now, I think the boardrooms are now saying, okay, digital is upon us. It's not a passing fad. What do we do? Many of them they don't have the dexterity in terms of tech that the fintechs have. They don't have the access to world-class engineers and data scientists. And sometimes they're not in geographies where the really most talented people around the world want to come and live. And I think it's been augmented a bit post-COVID because with a work from home structure. But that is a key issue. And banks don't have cultures that necessarily are attractive, create gravitational pull to the kind of people we're talking about. The bank technology is very often really old and clunky. My own experience is that many of the systems that the banks use, were built 30, 40 years ago. Some of them are built in COBOL. Many of them are not even documented. And many of the banks have just grown by agglomeration of buying other banks that look like them and just smushing them together and have never integrated the systems. So most banks are still working through a technology debt that they haven't yet paid back. So they are at a significant disadvantage. Now, all that said, with great leadership and with real focus on digital transformation, we worked with Fifth Third, we've worked very close to Scotiabank, for example, with Nacho Deschamps there. They can make great strides very quickly, but it requires the people at the top of the bank to be passionate leaders of transformation. When I was a young man, Rich Fairbank and I joined Signet Bank from Strategy Consulting, and we led what became Capital One out of a very traditional, well-run, blue chip, River Road, Richmond-based bank. And it took 3 to 4 years to drive that transformation. Transformation does not occur in months. So the senior management of the banks that are going to be progressive have to be incredibly committed, incredibly passionate, and lead the effort. It's not something that they can outsource, I'm afraid, to our friends at BCG or Bain or McKinsey. So the banks do have a lot going for them. The fintechs have a lot going for them. I think often the answer is the 2 + 2 = 5, where they partner up in various ways, where the banks buy some of the fintechs and manage through some of the cultural issues that can emerge. Certainly the banks do have the economics to be able to make that work, although it's not easy. And I think that this is the time where the banks, at the very least, have to go to school. The only thing I know for sure is that the worst thing that you can do if I'm a bank is ignore this and pretend it's not happening, and hopefully it goes away, and go back to the knitting of, let's find banks that look like mine, that are a bit smaller, and buy them and smush them together, which has been the game plan for the last generation. That, I think, that game is not over. It still works, but it's not going to catapult you into the future. Consumers are going to feel more power. They're going to be less patient. They're going to ironically unbundle more and more, where they'll have specific providers for specific products. Unless there's a really good reason to put them together, consumers will progressively unbundle. We will see the economic rents that are advantaged as a result of information asymmetry or power imbalances start to diminish. And I'm hopeful then that we'll see financial services, particularly in a fintech-driven economy, that's more embracing of the underserved of America, where they're not taken advantage of, where they have access, where financial service entities spend more time on education and enabling. So I'm hopeful that that will happen, because we really we look at how the tiny amount of savings that Americans have and how much buffer they have, how much they don't respect their traditional financial service providers, many of which have got net promoter scores that are 10 or 20, when many of the fintechs that we deal with are 70s and 80s. So I'm really hopeful that the wave that we talk about now, this Mistral wind of fintech that's up at our back, is going to be incredibly beneficial to our society and the way that people manage their own finances, in a way that people spend even less time on it, because it will work for them. And they'll certainly spend less time worrying about it and wringing their hands about it and staying up awake at night, worrying about it. So putting the power in the hands of the consumer, where the transparency is clear and the products make sense, and the consumer is the one who benefits from that. It is broad, and it's broadening. Because we now see Stripe and Square and Credit Karma and Plaid and Nubank and N26 and these wonderful companies that are now getting to escape velocity, or already are at escape velocity. Young entrepreneurs look at that and say, I want to build something like that. I'm excited about that. We have more money coming into venture capital. It used to be that there was QED and Ribbit and Nika and Bain Capital and a few specialists who grew up in this business who knew it very well. And we're now seeing Sequoia and Benchmark and Accel and Andreessen, these wonderful venture firms that have been around forever in tech, who now are developing fintech arms as it becomes more of a thing. So more money, more exits, and more ideas, more entrepreneurs begets just a greater velocity and energy in the space. And I don't see that backing off anytime soon, which is incredibly exciting to be sitting where I am at my age, to be able to witness this another whole chapter burgeoning is really fantastic. So I think that the sky is the limit here in terms of where does fintech go? In a sense, we've heard this said, in the limit, everything is fintech. And bolting on payments and lending and even wealth management alongside traditional businesses. We're just the first chapter of that process. Fintech is the digitalization of paper across the board in anything financial. It's amazing how many thousands of people exist, particularly in the big banks, who are just moving pieces of paper around. It's expensive. There's more mistakes that happen. Quality of service is down. And the people who do it don't really like doing it because it can be really numbingly boring. So fintechs are going to drive that process. So I think we're going to see the process of super fintechs emerging, where a fintech starts with a single product. It creates a wedge. It's able to make the unit economics work, and that's really, really critical, that they can make the unit economics work. And then once they've got some scale there, they're building the brand, the net promoter scores are terrific, they've got the product market fit, they're now scaling. Now you say, okay, so where do I take this? Do I go and do this, have the same product in a different geography? Or do I now look for my second product that is complementary, a good stablemate to my primary product? And I think what we're going to see more of is, particularly with the fintechs that have been successful and have the currency, they will buy smaller fintechs that have skills and capability in analogous products. The cultures are much more akin. The fintech across different fintechs, the cultures are more closely aligned than the fintechs to the banks, and therefore the assimilation can work, and the synergies are more likely to occur. And we're going to see fintechs that emerge that are going to have a broad vista of products that are going to be meeting the needs of the consumer, and then those entities will look to cross-sell, but make it really simple and easy and click to get and pre-authorized, so that people don't have to jump through a lot of hoops. I mean, I'm very skeptical about the effectiveness of cross-selling in general, but I know it can only work if you make the process incredibly transparent and lubricated on behalf of the consumer. So I'm really bullish that in the years to come, we're going to see fintechs emerge that are not worth tens of billions, and maybe ones that are not even worth hundreds of billions, but we're going to see $1 trillion fintechs emerge. And I think that's the future that we're really staring at.